You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike. Welcome to the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. So just to educate the listening public, we have decided that while the coronavirus issue is remaining relevant and we're all sheltering at home or listening to the different dictates that are given out by the government, that we're going to continue to do at least a show on that once a week. So we're going to put out 2 shows until the crisis abates. And so I'll put the coronavirus stuff out usually on a Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll still have our regular show on Friday, and that will cover other...
People should know we're not going to say anything different than other people are saying, but we're probably going to say it better.
Oh, we're going to be so much more insightful.
One hopes.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, yeah. I'm not going to lie. People should probably get their coronavirus information from us exclusively.
Will there be enough?
Well,
it's just a 24/7 world.
Exactly. No, it won't be enough. But that is a part of
binging out on all that.
But that's a part of my message to people is
see how good I'm a professional.
Yeah, you need to reduce the amount. You are good. You're great at the segue. It's like you've done it before.
I've ridden one my whole life. They just invented them a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely. But part of what my message to people has been reduce the amount, either do one of 2 things. Either reduce the amount of information that you are getting or do real, informative, unbiased research to understand what is happening, because the news clips, we're in a 24/7 news media. We have so many news channels when you include the internet, and everybody's trying to find some new angle. And what that has now created is a lot of information that appears to be conflicting and contradictory, and it's just confusing.
Well, and look at the category. Don't stop watching Fox News and start listening to Rush Limbaugh instead.
Yeah.
I mean, what are the categories of spectrum from which these news media originate? So if you're trying to balance between Fox and MSNBC, you're going to be whipsawed back and forth. Your message is, don't let that work you up. Don't let that increase your stress level. And maybe the only way to do that is to stop listening, stop checking as frequently or as oftenly.
Right.
And if you do listen or check, perhaps you should find more original sources. Go to some of the sites that hospitals or the CDC or whichever group are positioning right now, so that you can see unfiltered data rather than politically referenced data.
And my fear is that there's a large segment of the population that would say, I can't go to the CDC or a government backed site because they're the ones who are lying to us. And if that is your perspective, then certainly I'm not going to try and dissuade
Harvard
you of that.
And Stanford and MIT.
But but then, they might say, well, the educated elite are lying to us too. So, I mean, there are people who can have any number of aversions to any of those. But so let me explain why I'm saying I think we need less information. So I
only go to news sources that reestablish my confirmed prejudices.
Which is confirmation bias, which, yes, we could do a whole show on confirmation bias. But I was doing a radio spot last week, and so I was doing some show prep for that. And while I was doing that, one of the very first articles that came up when I started searching for new information was an ABC report that said 8% of all coronavirus victims were under the age of 15, which is a number. It may even be accurate, but it's meaningless because it doesn't give me any context. It doesn't tell me, how many of those individuals under the age of 18 had organ transplants, how many of them were cancer survivors, because those individuals would be immunosuppressed because of their disorders and therefore would be more susceptible. So without context, you can't listen to, just like, we're doing this on Friday, what is today? The 27th
Of March.
Yeah. And the news reports today are that the United States is now the epicenter of new infection reports. So we've surpassed China, we've surpassed Italy, which is true, but what's the context, right? So
Especially if the context is, as it is in Missouri, no one's been tested.
Exactly. No one's been tested, and there's still fewer than 500 confirmed cases in Missouri.
Right. But you almost cannot, even though the national government says anybody wants to test can have one.
Right.
The reality is if you live in Missouri, which is where we live, you can't get
No, the reality is that you can't get a test just because you want one. Yeah. That if you, even if you went and said, I want to be tested, I want to volunteer to be tested, then they're going to say, do you have a fever? Do you have a cough? They're going to check for the top 3 most reported symptoms, and if the answer is no, they're going to say, oh, you don't need a test. Which doesn't mean that you don't have coronavirus, because we know that you can be positive for coronavirus and be asymptomatic.
Let's say you don't fall within our parameters to be able to give you
Well, if you want a test and they won't give it to you, that's the same thing. To you it is.
Experientially, yeah.
Yeah.
The answer is you can't have one.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not to say you don't need one. It's to say you can't have one.
Right.
Because I'm not going to give you
But so then that goes to when I had said, hey, let's continue to do the coronavirus thing, and I sent you some articles, and one of the articles that I sent you was specifically about this. What about, so, whether you call it hypochondrosis, so you think you have everything underneath the sun just because somebody else said they had it, or you have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, there are a lot of people out there, or you just have generalized anxiety disorder. There are a lot of people that are out there, they're saying, oh, stay at home. Well, guess what? This is allergy season. And I know my allergies are just incredibly inflamed. And how many
people?
people?
If you go to Walmart and start sneezing, people are going to be panicking.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but then you as a person might think to yourself, oh my gosh, I want to be safe. I want to know definitively, do I have COVID-19? So then you go to a reputable place that's given the test out, and they test they take your temperature. They say you don't have a fever, you don't need a test, you don't meet the criteria,
right.
And now you're stuck thinking, oh my God, do I have COVID-19?
Right.
But I can't get a test,
right.
And you're freaking out.
Yeah, and you're worried about your kids and your family. I just saw my grandmother yesterday, all
right.
that kind of stuff.
Right.
So how does one avoid that?
Well, the avoidance is that you have to be able to monitor and calm your own internal anxiety, which, in psychological terms we call self-soothing. And yet if you are not good at that, so for whatever reason, if you weren't taught it as a young person, or you have some underlying real condition like obsessive compulsive disorder that makes it really, really hard for you to be able to self-soothe, and you can't get a test, you are dealing with a perpetual state of anxiety, even if it's self-induced. That's a real thing to you.
Yeah, and so many of us have learned to self-soothe, especially if we weren't taught as children to do that, with substances,
right.
Ice cream, alcohol, chocolate. And so we find ourselves turning to that now in this time of crisis.
Right.
And there are secondary costs for that impact us down the road that we need to be aware of.
Right. We talked about that when we were doing the show last week, how many people are changing their diets and eating poorly and then not exercising because the gyms are closed and they don't want to go out. I mean, if you've got obsessive compulsive disorder, then you're probably not going outside to exercise. And so it becomes a downward spiral. And what I would like to say to people is, number one, I would like for people to either monitor more closely the sources of information they have. Ideally, I would like people to limit the amount of information that they're getting. I know that everybody feels like, oh, I've got to be informed. But the truth is that if 350,000 people get coronavirus in the United States, which is way more than any computer model has ever predicted, that's 1% of the human population in the United States. 1%.
Right.
And so if somebody said you have a 99% chance of winning the lottery, would you play?
I would.
Absolutely. So that's really what we're talking about, is that even if the worst case scenario
Expect the payout
happens,
to be a lot less, but
Yes.
I would play.
well, sure,
Yeah.
sure. Well, maybe or maybe not. I mean, if somebody said, I guarantee you're going to win the lottery, you got a 99% probability.
Saw an article in the paper today that said the lottery is worried about their payouts now because nobody's buying tickets. Because
Because they have to go outside to go buy them.
Right.
Yeah.
So current winners may be dissatisfied.
But,
But
statistically, that'd be the time to play.
Frame your conversation a little
Yeah.
bit differently.
Okay.
It's kind of like being homeless and going through the garbage trying to find something good
Yeah.
to eat. If you're just mass consuming all this blaring news media that's Chicken Little, the sky is falling, we're all going to die, and you're looking through that for a nugget that can comfort you, the odds are not at all high that you're going to find anything comforting.
Right. You're not.
So there may be places where you can get more accurate, scientifically driven information. But if you don't believe in science, or if
Right.
you don't believe in the agenda of
Right.
whoever's putting the information out there, the best strategy
Right.
may be to just quit consuming.
And you and I think, we would be comfortable declaring ourselves that we would say that the CDC or other government-backed sources of information, certainly scholarly sources like Harvard, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, that those are reliable sources. You and
I would have said that historically.
Yes.
I don't say it now
okay.
because I think there's been too much damage done to the CDC in terms of their budget,
Yeah, the CDC, I
personnel,
don't,
staff.
I was just going to say, I don't know if I would agree with the CDC right now.
And from what I read in the volume of material that I consume, is right now the politicians are making decisions and they're not even inviting the scientists into the meetings to get their data because they don't want to hear it. They want to make a pronouncement that fits their agenda
Right.
and skews our perceptions. The other thing is when you were talking about the numbers of new cases, the numbers of death, whatever, nobody really, and we have to flatten the curve, try to make a V-shaped recovery. All of that, I believe you can't do that without accurate testing information that tells us
Right.
whether or not we have it.
Right.
How many people in our population have it. Because if we're going to go out in public,
I'd say how many people in the world have it. I think that what we need is the ability to test every human being on the face of the planet.
regularly,
Yeah,
Because-
but at least initially, so that you
So
could identify
flatten this
who
curve.
has it. You can quarantine those people for 14 days, and you'd at least stop the initial.
their ability to go out and repopulate the
Yeah.
virus. Yeah,
And
that makes sense to me, but I'm not in charge.
well, and it might be unrealistic because I don't know how you get, 5 billion tests, which is what the human population is.
But
But
how do you get everybody to take one?
yeah,
There are people that refuse to participate in anything the government
I know,
does. There are
right.
people that isolate.
exactly.
and
Oh,
are
absolutely.
paranoid. I mean,
Right.
did you read the book Educated? Have you read that?
no.
Okay, well, never mind. I'll find a different example. But there are people that go out in the wilderness and are survivalists and say anything that's organized by society is trying to destroy me and I need to avoid it. And so they do. And so when you find those, whether you're talking about cholera
Right.
or polio or the coronavirus, they're resistant to any kind of
Well, of course. I mean, I remember when Jenny
Vaccination.
McCarthy and who was her husband at the time? Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
When they were going off about vaccinations and that vaccination causes autism, and
there's still a huge anti-vaccine movement. I mean,
And
people don't believe
and
it.
there is absolutely, and I'm going to absolutely declare myself on this, there is not a single shred of clinical evidence that supports the idea that vaccinations cause autism. Period. That's just a fact. If people don't agree with it,
The people that don't believe it will say you're in the
Yes.
service of the vaccine.
and they
companies.
can say
They're
whatever they
making
want,
money. I know,
but I'm willing
but-
to declare that anybody who doesn't believe that is wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. And I know we try not to be political or whatever, but I feel really,
Well,
really strongly about
I don't
that.
mind being political at all. I can say you're wrong about anything that I want to.
Yeah. So I don't know how we're going to get enough tests to test the entire world population, but we know definitively, and again, I guess if people are not going to be willing to say that there are sources of information that you can trust, but I would argue we know definitively that that will work because that's what South Korea did. So South Korea took the WHO test that was provided. We wouldn't take that test in the United States. We decided we had to develop our own test. Then we developed a flawed test. Now that we have a reliable test, it's taken a long time to actually ramp up production of that. But the WHO had a test. They gave that test to South Korea. South Korea tested virtually every person in the country, and they were able to avoid an explosion of
they gave
transmission.
that test to countries all over the world, and they offered them to us. And we don't know who made the decision or why they made the decision not to accept it. We just know that they weren't accepted.
I'm not accusing anybody. I don't know if it was the government or the CDC. No, but we
you can't get that information right now.
Right.
No one is discussing.
But
why.
we know we refrained from accepting the test.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
at our cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that if we would have accepted
So are we
it,
helping people reduce their stress when we get into this and get worked up like this?
I don't know.
I thought that
Probably.
was what we were trying to do.
Probably not. Okay, so we're going to ratchet it down and get back on track.
Yeah.
So we've talked before about ways of trying to reduce anxiety. One of the things that we have discussed is not just stop trying to consume information, especially conflicting information about the virus, but to disconnect. So people are spending way too much time looking at screens.
Yeah.
And that's not good for us. So we know that there are physiological costs for individuals looking at screens. And so when they do the clinical studies on that, anything that is 8 hours or above, absolutely 100%, it causes an increase in the perceived depression that that individual experiences. Now, that's not you. I'm not saying that that's universal. It's just because you look at a screen for 8 hours that you're going to be more depressed. But statistically, that's where the increase in depression breaks, is 8 hours of screen time or more. 4 hours of screen time or less has shown to be not influential.
In how much time? A day? A week?
A day. And so then there's that, squishy middle area between 4 and 8. But the point is that I would be recommending to people that they try and limit their exposure to screens to a more reasonable amount, which would also include binge watching Netflix.
Yeah.
And anything.
Well, they still make real books, don't they, that you can open and read?
I believe that you can buy books, yes.
Yeah. Well, actually, the Webster Groves, Missouri, where I live, the library has collected a number of books that they were going to dispose of or sell. They put them on a table outside and said, anybody that wants one, come get one, because right now the library's closed. And then they said, we sterilized the backs of the books, and we have gloves if you want to come and pick one up, if you're worried about bringing something home that you don't know where it's been. But I think there are communities that are still trying to make libraries viable providers of information within the community in ways that diminish exposure to risk.
And one of the articles that I had sent you today that I will actually post with this episode had some at least preliminary anecdotal research that said there may be a way of countermanding or at least reducing the effect of some of the damage that screens do to the human brain, and that was by listening to music.
Yeah.
But listening mindfully. So you have to listen to music and try and pay attention to the lyrics and listen to the beat. Now, what we didn't do, or what I don't know, is does that include, is Metallica just as effective as a symphony?
So I guess in your definition, what is music?
What is music?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know that has been something that's been investigated. So I can't definitively say that one kind of music is better than
Or you're
another.
talking about tonal music from the Orient, or atonal music, and then tonal music from the West, the Occident.
Right. But I think mindfully listening to music, to me, makes a lot of sense, both because I do think that can have a prophylactic value in countermanding some of the damage that's done by screens when you listen to music mindfully, but also it's taking you away from the screen.
So you're talking about both kinds of music, country and Western?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
absolutely.
Good.
Both. Yeah. Yeah, but I think that that's one thing that I would encourage people to
Yes.
think about. Reading a book is something that I would encourage people to think about. We've talked about the diet. We've talked about the need to continue to get exercise.
Yoga and stretching exercises. Yeah, which if you don't know them, or if you're at home and say, well, I can't go to the gym, there are things that you can download on the internet, stretching exercises and so on, that don't require any mechanical assistance, any
Right.
equipment that you've invested in, just require you to do it.
Right.
So,
And I've spoken to a handful of clients. So in my practice, the way that it's broken is that it's been exactly, like statistically exactly 50-50. 50% of people are wanting to do remote sessions, which I'm doing. 50% of the people want to do in-person sessions, which I'm continuing to do, because in Missouri we are still allowed to do that. You can
Right.
still go see your doctor, and people are looking for a reason to get out. So I want to provide that for people for as long as is realistically and healthfully possible. If it becomes apparent that we shouldn't be doing that, I will absolutely shut that down. But I do have a handful of clients who are really, really preoccupied with the virus and with the potential of contracting the virus. And when I talk to those individuals, I haven't really been able to find anything that is beneficial. It doesn't matter if I say, 350,000 people is 1% of the population. If I say, you're in an age bracket that doesn't appear to be at risk, it doesn't appear that there's anything logically or rationally that you can say to these people to assuage their fears. So what I'm saying to people is, I'm not trying to do that for you. I'm not trying to take that fear away from you. If that is a fear that you have, that is something that I recognize as a valid concern. So I'm not going to try and take that away from you. Tell me what I can do to help soothe that for you.
well, and one of the things that we can do together is stop feeding the fear.
Yeah.
So reduce the consumption of anxiety-provoking details that you get in the media.
Right, right. But, I can understand and even appreciate somebody saying, don't try and quote statistics to me.
Well, that's because we all know figures never lie, but liars always figure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For sure. And so I'm not trying to do that for anyone. If you have a very overwhelming concern about the coronavirus, I understand that. That is a valid concern. So then tell me or tell someone in your sphere what they can do to help soothe that. And the only thing that maybe can be done, right, is that you may need someone just to sit with you and hear you talk about your fear.
Yeah, it's not about the coronavirus per se, but it's what we say in counseling all the time. If you've reached the point in your relationship where you're arguing about the facts, you've missed the boat.
Exactly.
It's not about the facts. It's
Right.
about the feelings. It's about the fear. And it's about what can we do
Right.
to reality test and control the fear.
Right. And so when those
we're
people,
not going to debate numbers.
right, when those people are saying to me, I'm scared, I say, I hear you saying you're scared.
Absolutely.
I understand why you are scared. There's some validity to why you are scared.
Absolutely.
I would like to say to you that I am scared as well, but I'm going to continue to live my life, try and continue to live it as regularly and
These
as
are the
fulfillingly
strategies
as
I
possible.
use to
Right.
reduce my anxiety. These are the strategies others use. This is the success that I know is out there. Are you able to use these strategies?
Right.
Or can we find some different ones for you?
Yeah, but I think it's really, I think people experience it as insulting when people say, well, that's irrational.
So don't say that.
Yeah, so don't say that.
It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Because we're refocusing. We're
Right.
focusing now on hearing you accurately and on finding ways to reduce your distress.
Right.
So debating the numbers isn't going to do it.
And for anybody out there who, whether you're local to St. Louis or not, anybody who feels like that they need to reach out to somebody, our contact information is on the psychwithmike.com website, and we would certainly welcome anybody contacting us. If we can't do something for you, we can try and give you a resource to somebody who can do something for you. What I don't want people doing is suffering in silence. If you are validly concerned, or even you think invalidly concerned, about what's going on, then reach out and make a contact with somebody. Not that that person can soothe or eliminate that fear, but talking about the fear can be beneficial. All right, so hopefully this was beneficial for people. If you want to get a hold of us, psychwithmike.com is the place to do that. And we will talk to you about the coronavirus again next week. If you have any concerns about it or any questions about it or have suggestions for what you would like us to discuss, psychwithmike.com. See you next week.